Hi, welcome to The Mind, where we all are looking to grow one day at a time. Today we will be starting Chapter 12 of the E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. Chapter 12. Your Primary Aim. The chief characteristic of the volitional act is the existence of a purpose to be achieved, the clear vision of an aim. Quote from Robert Assagioli, The Act of Will. I doubt that by now you'd be surprised to find out that I don't believe your business to be the first order of business on our agenda. You are. Nor will you be surprised to hear that I don't believe your business is your life, though it does and can play a significantly important role in your life. But before you can determine what that role will be, you must ask yourself these questions. What do I value most? What kind of life do I want? What do I want my life to look like, to feel like? Who do I wish to be? Your primary aim is the answer to all these questions. Consider it from another perspective. I'd like you to imagine that you are about to attend one of the most important occasions of your life. It will be held in a room sufficiently large to seat all of your friends, your family, your business associates, anyone and everyone to whom you are important and who is important to you. Can you see it? The walls are draped with deep golden tapestries. The lighting is subdued, soft, casting a warm glow on the faces of your expectant guests. Their chairs are handsomely upholstered in a golden fabric that matches the tapestries. The golden carpeting is deeply piled. At the front of the room is a dais, and on the dais a large, beautifully decorated table with candles burning at either end. On the table in the center is the object of everyone's attention, a large, shining, ornate box, and in the box is you, stiff as the proverbial board. Do you see yourself lying in the box, not a dry eye in the room? Now listen, from the four corners of the room comes a tape recording of your voice. Can you hear it? You're addressing your guests. You're telling them the story of your life. How would you like that story to go? That's your primary aim. What would you like to be able to say about your life after it's too late to do anything about it? That's your primary aim. If you were to write a script for the tape to be played for the mourners at your funeral, how would you like it to read? That's your primary aim. And once you've created the script, all you need to do is make it come true. All you need to do is begin living your life as if it were important. All you need to do is take your life seriously, to create it intentionally, to actively make your life into the life you wish it to be. Simple? Yes. Easy. Number. But absolutely essential if your business is to have any meaning beyond work. Because if your business is going to become an integral part of that tape, if your business is going to make a major contribution to the realization of your dream, if your business is going to become a significant component of your primary aim, you have to let your business know what that aim is. And how can you expect to do that if you don't know what it is? Do you see why your primary aim is so important to the success of your business? With no clear picture of how you wish your life to be, how on earth can you begin to live it? How would you know what first step to take? How would you measure your progress? How would you know where you were? How would you know how far you had gone? How would you know how much farther you had yet to go? Without your primary aim, you wouldn't. Indeed, you couldn't. It would be virtually impossible. As with mature companies, I believe great people to be those who know how they got where they are and what they need to do to get where they're going. Great people have a vision of their lives that they practice emulating each and every day. They go to work on their lives, not just in their lives. Their lives are spent living out the vision they have of their future in the present. They compare what they've done with what they intended to do, and where there's a disparity between the two, they don't wait very long to make up the difference. They go to work on their lives, not just in their lives. I believe it's true that the difference between great people and everyone else is that great people create their lives actively, while everyone else is created by their lives, passively waiting to see where life takes them next. The difference between the two is the difference between living fully and just existing. The difference between the two is living intentionally and living by accident. Let me repeat once more that great quote by Don Juan in Carlos Castaneda's A Separate Peace. The difference between a warrior and an ordinary man is that a warrior sees everything as a challenge, while an ordinary man sees everything as either a blessing or a curse. So before you start your business or before you return to it tomorrow, ask yourself the following questions. What do I wish my life to look like? How do I wish my life to be on a day-to-day basis? What would I like to be able to say I truly know in my life, about my life? How would I like to be with other people in my life, my family, my friends, my business associates, my customers, my employees, my community? How would I like people to think about me? What would I like to be doing 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when my life comes to a close? What specifically would I like to learn during my life, spiritually, physically, financially, technically, intellectually, about relationships? How much money will I need to do the things I wish to do? By when will I need it? These are just a few of the questions you might ask yourself in the creation of your primary aim. The answers become the standards against which you can begin to measure your life's progress. In the absence of such standards, your life will drift aimlessly, without purpose, without meaning. In that regard, your primary aim is the vision necessary to bring your business to life and your life to your business. It provides you with a purpose. It provides you with energy. It provides you with the grist for your day-to-day mill. That's what's been missing in my business, Sarah Albert shouted. Me? How could I have been so oblivious to something so obvious? Don't be so hard on yourself, I said. We are all oblivious. Join the club. Let me tell you a story. There was once a young man who had recently turned 40 whose life seemed to be going nowhere. Somehow he had never grabbed hold of a career. His life had no purpose. College had somehow eluded him. In his first year at UCLA, he couldn't find anything to hold his attention and he quit. He studied music, many said brilliantly, as a boy, but in his early adult years failed to find the conviction he needed to pursue it. Many different things attracted him: music, religion, mysticism, writing poetry, drugs, writing pulp fiction, money, none of them permanently. He took whatever jobs came along, and because of his natural and varied talents, he did whatever he did well. But even then, none of the jobs turned into anything with a future, at least not a future that attracted him. After leaving college at midterm, he drove to New York City to study art, quickly changed his mind and joined the army, which sent him to Korea. His father died suddenly, bringing him home to care for his mother and 2 younger siblings. Sometime after, he met an exciting woman, took off to Europe where they traveled from country to country on a motor scooter, and where he played saxophone and drew religious figures on the streets in front of cathedrals to earn enough money to eat. Finally, out of money and tired of the game, he and his woman friend were repatriated by the U.S. government and returned to New York City, where they contracted to drive a New York City yellow cab to L.A. to deliver it to its new owner. When he was 25, they married, had 2 children, moved to San Francisco, where the young man sold encyclopedias for a living, played saxophone on occasion, and became, over time, less young. Their life was a running battle. Eventually, after one too many rages about his wife's abuse of alcohol, her infidelity, and his lack of purpose, the whole thing came tumbling down into divorce. He immediately met a much younger woman whose eyes shined like his ex-wife's didn't, who read his poetry and was touched by it, who listened to his music and was awed by it, was satisfied just to sit by his side, no questions asked. And though he continued to sell encyclopedias, and though his heartfelt need for connecting with something that smacked of purpose continued to pain him privately throughout all of this, his life took a more positive turn with this new young woman who eventually became his second wife. He went back to college, left the book business, studied contracting and construction so he could work with his hands rather than his mouth, moved with his new, willing wife to Southern California, and maneuvered himself into framing jobs from which he was fired time after time until he learned how to pull it off. By this time, he was a man in his late 30s, beginning to do work that kids 20 years younger than him did. They regarded him on the job as something of a freak. His beard by now was down to his chest. His hair hung down over his shoulders. He wrote poetry at night, played jazz on the weekend, ate burritos with the Mexicans on the job, smoked dope in the evenings, and dreamed crazily about the future when he and his young wife would buy 20 acres in Mendocino County, build their own house with their own hands, raise a family, and have his 2 girls from his first marriage move in with them when everything was ready. They had a tiny one-bedroom house in Santa Ana, California, drove a '52 Chevy pickup, and along with their Great Dane named Dan and a little black poodle named Murray, they lived in a sense-steaming daze that seemed at the time close to what the perfect life must be like. But as with all good things, this too came to an end when our young man, turning older, pursued by the demons of some indefinable muse, decided to move back north now that they had their act together, saved up enough from living the right life, hands crusted and gnarly from honest work, body brown and beautiful from putting his muscles on the line, brain filled with the poetry he had written, the music he had renewed, and the dope he had smoked, knowing that it was time to become the contractor he had set out to become 3 years before, and that all it would take was one sizable kick to get them moving toward what he knew would be the fine resolution of his up-to-now raggedy search. He and his wife and his Great Dane, Dan, and his poodle named Murray, plus whatever else they had accumulated in the few years he spent working with his hands rather than his mouth in Southern California, piled it all up in the '52 Chevy pickup and moved back to the San Francisco they had come from not that long before. It was then that the big shift took place and the unpredictable happened. Our now 38-year-old hero and his young wife, along with the dogs and the pickup, were invited to move in temporarily with his sister and her husband while negotiating the purchase of their Mendocino acres. His brother-in-law had the idea that our hero would do well consulting in the area in which he was a tested expert, sales, with his advertising agency's high-tech small business clients, until such time, of course, that our hero settled down with his young bride on their Mendocino acres to follow his true calling. Understand, everyone knew that that was going to happen. Nobody doubted it. Full of the robust idealism that had marked his youthful passing, he was, without any doubt whatsoever, going to realize his vision. The 20 acres were all but his. It simply required the doing. Of course, there was also the contractor's license and the money, but no one thought that any of that would prove insurmountable. After all, here was a man who had lived a life that baffled good reason. Whatever he chose to do, he did. Whatever he did, he was good at. No matter that, once he did it, he grew tired of it. He chose to do that too. To his friends and his family, he was, if not unexplainable, certainly someone to be noticed, at times in amazement and at times with pity, but never without awe, because who knew what this man was going to do next? And somehow they all, in their own private way, envied him. Can you believe that? They envied him because he seemed so free. Despite the perpetual trouble he found himself in, despite his lack of direction, despite his whimsical and sometimes dangerous philosophy, there was no denying it. This man, although getting older, sometimes precipitously, was living a romantic adventure they write movies about, or if not that, a pitiful tragedy. By anyone's standards, he was living pretty close to the edge. Here's a guy on the cusp of middle age with a long beard, a young wife, 2 dogs, and a pickup, without a home of their own, living with family, searching for property they couldn't possibly afford, with hardly a thought in his head that anything was wrong at all with this picture, about to step on those moving stairs to somewhere that he was totally unprepared for. And take the step he did, and it was a stunner. He was, thanks to his brother-in-law's good intentions, suddenly set adrift in a world that could have been another planet for all he knew. In Silicon Valley, calling on techies who owned businesses whose names he couldn't even pronounce at first attempt, making stuff he didn't even know existed. He was dumbfounded by the magnitude of his ignorance, and yet something called him to stay. They asked him, "How can you help me?" He answered, "I don't know." They asked him, "What do you know about my business?" He answered, "Nothing." They looked at him for a long time. He sat and looked back and just thought. They said to him, "Why don't you come back after you've had some time to think about it?" He said he would, and he did, because he knew something was there. Understand, here's a guy who had been selling encyclopedias to people at night, in front of their television sets or on the dining room table. Watching their faces suspiciously regard him as someone who came out of the night, until he spread out the encyclopedia and the vividly colored panels that showed all the books graphically alive, the maps, the transparencies of the human body, the endless list of topics, of wonders the world withheld from them in their ordinary lives, the promise to their children, even their children to come, of education, of knowledge, of information, long before the information age had arrived. Here their eyes would awaken and lighten up to all these colorful pictures of what was possible, and now almost within their reach, pending a decision. He had done that late at night, grinding away in front of Frank and Marge until finally Frank, with his last breath, would say sort of covertly, "Well, Marge, what'd you think? Think we should do it?" And he would sit there, our 30-something hero, waiting without a movement, without a whisper of encouragement to Marge, let alone to Frank, waiting for the inevitable yes or no, either of which would turn him back out into the night to, if he was lucky, go another round at Ben and Mary's, with all the little kids hanging on the pictures and making messes on his laminated plates. To this guy, this world, this Silicon Valley was a miracle. And I get to do this during the day? And so, visit them he would. All the while feeling stupid, knowing nothing about their world, or their business, or the little weird things they made there, the little black boxes with their arcane significance so far beyond his experience of coffee tables and poetry and music and framing and pitching and closing, this intricate little world of theirs that lived in some cubicle inside of their foreign, tight, screwy little brains. And yet, intuitively, he knew that he knew something that they needed. He knew that there was something waiting there for him, something his peculiar life had, in some strange, inexplicable way, prepared him for, something only someone who had lived in such an unconscious, cataclysmic, totally disorganized yet always passionate state, doing this and that, could fully appreciate. And it was then that the curtain lifted, the curtain between the world that was theirs and the world that was his. But most of all, the curtain that stood between himself and himself, the curtain that separated him from his life. It was then that he realized with a suddenness that made him giddy that, while he didn't understand their business, neither did they. And in that one shuddering instant of truth our hero was reborn. He discovered an entirely new life. And with the discovery of his new life, there came for the very first time in his life the beginning of some purpose, to never let the curtain down again, to never allow the curtain to cover what was hiding there behind it. That the world was nothing like he had believed it to be, that no one knew what he had believed they knew, that everything was just like he had thought it was, a mystery, but that he wasn't the only one who didn't know what was going on. What he learned in Silicon Valley is that no one knew what was going on. It was completely open to interpretation, and his guess was as good as anyone's. My God, probably even better. After all, he had met Frank and Marge face to face. He had survived the worst of the worst confrontations. He had even been attacked by a German shepherd dog while he was attempting to make his final close. Right across the kitchen table. Who in Silicon Valley could say that, and live to tell about it? Yo, and he had even made the sale. Walked out with a torn contract in hand and a check. Who said little black boxes were dangerous? Who said there was anything to fear, anything he couldn't understand? I stopped long enough to feel how much this story had touched Sarah and how much she wanted to ask the obvious question, but I had to finish, so I went on. And so that chapter of our hero's life was closed and a new chapter opened. He moved into his early 40s and the end of his second marriage, which also by this time had produced a child, his third daughter, another love of his life who could not, as no child can ever do, repair a broken marriage. During the years that followed, he became about the best anyone could be in his now chosen profession. He learned the secrets he thought were hidden. He married a woman far bigger than the others, had 2 more children, fought battles with his ignorance at times, titanic in scope, moved through one obstacle after another, wrote books, spoke throughout the world, built a great business, only to watch it almost fail, persisted in building it up again, lanced, jabbed, wrestled, grappled, laughed, sang, loved, and roared, and through it all remembered one simple thing that meant more to him than anything else he had ever thought. The curtain. The curtain. Keep the curtain up at all cost, because it is the curtain that kept him shrouded in darkness, and it's the darkness that holds out the light. It is the light, the openness, the clearing of all the obstacles to knowing that had become his true purpose, to be open, to be awake, to be available to what's really going on, to give up false beliefs. And for only one reason, his life was at stake. And that's the point, Sarah. It's not your business you have to fear losing, it's something much bigger than that. It's yourself. And that's what this whole thing is about. What truths are your curtain hiding from you? What misunderstanding keeps you where you are, in the past, in the dark, shrouded in your limited beliefs, shrinking from the world, from the light on the other side of the curtain? Until you lift the curtain, Sarah, until you dare to pull the mask off the world's face, until you move beyond your comfort zone, you will never know what it is you are missing out there. It's you, Sarah. It's you that's waiting out there for you to find on the other side of the curtain. I know, Sarah, because the man I've been telling you about is me. When the curtain lifted, I learned something. That there's no one else out there but you.